Okay, good morning. Our learning is in Ishmas Mindel Mariam Bas Kalman Reuven Her Neshama Shem Aliyah. We are up to Kuf Mem Aleph. Kuf Mem Aleph. Like what? Like 15? Yeah, about like 15 blot away from the end. It's pretty good. Okay, so we are up to the Mishnah at the top of. You bet. Mega.
I wrote it since I was only here at the end.
Honorary member. We'll let you come along. Okay. as long as you sponsor. Good call, Sweet. You're good, Sweet. You're good. Okay. Okay, Kuf Mem Aleph, Amud Aleph. We are at the Mishnah, and we're going to learn a whole bunch of halachos. It's not as, it's a little more disjointed, easy Amud, but a little disjointed. Halacha here. We'll pull out. Okay, so Hakash. So first, we're going to start with some halachos of muktzah. So Hakash shal gam yamita. You have straw that's on a bed. Straw is typically something that is muktzah. It is not something which is used even for, unless we'll see some specific scenarios where straw is not muktzah, but otherwise, the assumption as you go into Shabbos that straw is muktzah, and it's on a bed, and a person wants to sleep on this bed. Now, if a person really was using the straw as a mattress, what they would do is they take the straw, stuff it into a sheet, and that would be their mattress back in the day. But if it's just straw sitting on the bed, lo yinanenu v'yado, a person's not allowed to move it with their hands because it is muktzah. Ella minano begufa, you're allowed to move it with your body. In other words, if you want to get it comfortable, right? You can imagine it, it's gonna, as opposed to your amazing mattress, which is perfect, and consistent, the straw is a little bit, all over the place. So you can move it around with your body. As we spoke about before, you're allowed to move muktzah, all muktzah, for any reason, at least according to some poskim, but not the Chazon Ish, but the way many paskin is you're allowed to move all muktzah with your body, right? So if you have muktzah that is sitting outside your house, you're allowed to kick it into the house. That's okay. So here too, you're allowed to move it with your body. That's allowed. However, let's say the straw was designated as animal feed, or there was a pillow or sheet on it from before Shabbos, meaning designating it as a mattress. Then it's no longer muktzah. You're allowed to move it with your hand, right? So any object like that where you've demonstrated by doing something that it's now going to be used for non-muktzah purpose, for a purpose on Shabbos, then it's no longer muktzah. Okay? Machbesh shal balei batim atirim. A householder's press is allowed to be released. So what's a householder's press? So basically their way of iron, instead of having an iron that we have, they basically had some contraption, which kind of looks like an olive press or something like that, where they put the clothing in, and then they tightly close it on top of it to iron it. This was the iron they had. So it was the household one, which as we'll see is not so strong. It's good, it's decent, but basically if you come into Shabbos and your shirt that you want to wear Shabbos morning is sitting in this press, you're allowed to release it and take the thing off and take the shirt out. That's not there's no problem doing so. But you're not allowed to initially press it down on Shabbos. Why? Because typically the way this press would work is you close it, and then it would take 24 hours for it to work. And therefore you're doing something on Shabbos for after Shabbos, because you're ironing, by closing this item on your shirt on Shabbos, typically it's not going to be ready. It takes a while. It's sitting there in the press, and so you're basically preparing for after Shabbos on Shabbos. However, if it's a launderer's press, then you're not even allowed to you're not allowed to release it. Why? The Rashi and others explain the reason is because there it's tied really, really tightly. The launderer's one was done very professionally, and it's really, really tight, and releasing it is similar, not identical, but similar to demolishing, right? Basically, it's almost since it's so tight, and you start taking off the handles, whatever it is, to release it, it's as if it's like demolishing, which of course is asur on Shabbos, and therefore midrabanan, it is going to be asur for that reason. However, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, im hayam mutter me'erev Shabbos, it was partially released before Shabbos. Let's say the way this press worked is there was two latches, and one of the latches was already open, so it's not fully done. Therefore, again, we're talking about a rabbinic form of demolishment. If it's already partially undone, then you're allowed to take off the other thing and release it. Okay, mattress kulav shamter, you're allowed to release the whole, release it completely and remove the garment from it. Okay, says the Gemara. Points out the Gemara on 14182. Amr of Nachman says, "Hi pulga." This radish, we already saw this quoted earlier. A radish that was plucked and then buried in the ground again, right? So basically you have a radish. A radish is shaped like a triangle, okay? So like this, and basically it was plucked, and then you put it back in the ground, okay? So if it was never taken out of the ground, then you're not allowed to release it, take it off from the ground. That is tolish. That is, you're not allowed to take a fruit off of the tree. You're not allowed to take something out of the ground on Shabbos. That would be asur. But over here, it's not really, getting the same nutrients from the ground. The reason they put it in the ground, remember, is because this was the primitive fridge. They didn't have ways of keeping things cool, and they put things back in the ground. So, milmal lamata shari. If it's right side up, if it's like a triangle, then you're allowed to just pull it out of the ground. Okay. However, if it's upside down, milmata lamala asar. If it's like this, then it's forbidden. Why is it forbidden like this? Why? Because Rav Nachman is basically saying that when I pull it out this way, then the ground underneath, right, the ground on the side of the top is going to be moved indirectly, but the ground is going to be moved. The ground is muktzah, and I'm moving the ground indirectly. Yeah? See what's happening? Yeah? So Amr of Ada Bar Hava, Amri Beirav, the scholars of the academy said, Tanina Delok Rav Nachman. We learned a Mishnah that is not consistent with Rav Nachman. Our Mishnah, Hakash Lagam Mitzah Le'inanu Biyado. If there's straw in a bed, a person's not allowed to move it with their hands. Aval Menanu Begufa, you're allowed to move it with your body. If it's animal feed, Kar Sudden, if it's a pillow or sheet on it, Menanu Biyado, you're allowed to move it with your hand. Shmamina, Tiltul Menatzad, Lo Shmei Tiltul. Our Mishnah teaches us you're allowed to move it with your body, right? So that's moving something indirectly is not a problem. And this does not go like Rav Nachman, who basically said that when I'm moving the radish, that is that's right, or that basically the smaller side is the top, and in doing so I'm going to indirectly move the soil. That's not allowed. Marsa Shmamina. Indeed, that's the case. Rav Nachman is of an opinion which is inconsistent with our Mishnah. Rav Nachman is of the opinion that moving muktzah indirectly is not allowed. We do not pass like Rav Nachman. So again, practically speaking, any object of muktzah that is, so we had all the different rules, like you're allowed to move muktzah, class, klish machla iser for the place that you need, etc., etc. But sometimes, again, a classic example that comes to my mind is you have the Amazon package outside. So typically you're not allowed to move muktzah for its own sake, right? You can't move it to protect it. But if you kick it into your house, according to most posts, according to, again, not Chaznish, but others, and this is the normative ruling, you'd be allowed to do so because that's moving it in an indirect fashion, not with your hands at all, and therefore moving muktzah in that fashion would be fine. Good? Good.
So you can carry your mail in if you do it with your teeth?
Yeah. The neighbors might call the police on you. Okay. Yes.
Sonny's my neighbor.
Okay, but yes, you can move your mail in with your teeth. That would be fine. Yeah. Amar Rav Yehuda. Hi, Meidzak. Chada bekata de sakina shri. Okay, now we're going to talk about tochen. Tochen is there's a prohibition. One of the 39 prohibitions is chopping things in a very small fashion. Okay, so you can't chop things into a very small fashion. You can't crush things. That is all part of tochen. Okay, so let's say you wanna prepare some food. So the halacha is you crush peppers one at a time. Bekata de sakina shri, with the handle of the knife. Okay, so the handle of the knife means you're doing it in a very abnormal fashion. You don't typically do so. Tarte asr. If you do two at a time, that's prohibited. Rav Amar, Kevin Mashani, once you make a shinoi, afilu tuvanami, you're allowed to crush even many at a time. Okay, so if you want to crush things into small, you want to take things, start crushing things, a banana, whatever it is, you want to crush it into small amounts, into small sizes and crush it, you're allowed to do so with the back of a knife, back of a spoon. That's allowed because that is abnormal and therefore not even asr midrabanan. You're allowed to do as many as you need, obviously only for food that you're going to be eating that day. Okay, so crushing things in an abnormal fashion is mutter. Okay, another halacha, not relevant to again, we're going to like a bunch of halachos over here, not all relevant to one another. From Rav Yehuda, halacha from Rav Yehuda. The only connection is Rav Yehuda taught the last halacha. He's teaching this halacha as well. Man desache b'maya, a person who is bathing in a stream of water and they want to go out. So let's just pause here for a second. The poskim do point out now there is an issur of going into a large body of water, a body of water that not that you can't see the edges. So going into like an ocean or something like that on Shabbos, everyone agrees is asr. Going into a smaller body of water, there is some discussion. Bottom line is the contemporary poskim, and past few hundred years, basically asr going into like any pool of water. But theoretically, that's like a later development. Theoretically, to go into a pool of water which you have an edge around it, meaning like a pool, not like a lake, not a river, but like something where you could see the edge of it, like a small body of water. Technically would be okay. However, when you go out, linagev nafshe beresha v'hadar lislik, you have to dry yourself first and then go out. Now, what that means is basically you should dry yourself as much as you can before, like maybe you're standing there with your feet in the edge of the water. Dry yourself off and then go onto the dry land. Why? Dilma aslatuya arba amos b'karmelis, because when you go out and you're soaked, you have water on you, and then let's say you start walking in the quasi public domain, the karmelis, you're carrying water. Right, you're carrying water, and therefore you should dry yourself off so you're not carrying water when you go out. So, the next page, if you're in the article 141a3, ihachi ask Gemara ki chanach is nami ka dachi kocho ara amas vaser. Okay, forget going out of the water. When you're in the water, you go in the water, what happens? I walk in the water, and you move around, and you move around. The water moves around, so you've just caused water. Right? If I'm in the Rosh Hashanah and I kick something or whatever, I move something, so that's also moving. It's not only if I carry something. If I cause something to move 4 amos, that's also an issue. So when I walk into the water, I start moving around in the water, I'm causing water to move 4 amos, and therefore that should also be aser. So Gemara says, Kocho bekarmelis lagazru. So important halach over here, and that is that when Chazal came along and made a decree that not only will a full-fledged public domain will you be liable for carrying in a full-fledged public domain, but also there's going to be halachos of carrying in a carmelis, in a quasi-public domain. They never instituted kocho. Kocho means indirect movement. That indirect movement is never going to be an issue in a carmelis, and therefore, when I walk into the water and I move the water around by my movement, that is kocho. That's my force that's causing it to happen. That was never part of the decree, and therefore, if you're in the water and you're moving water 4 amos, that is not a problem. Okay. Fine. Another ruling that relates to Shabbos, again, not relevant to the halachos before. Amar Abai v'Tamar Rabbi Yehuda, tit shal gabe raglo, clay which is on a person's foot or shoe. Mekancho bekarka, v'mekancho bekosel. You're allowed to scrape it off on the ground, but you're not allowed to scrape it off onto a wall. Okay, so keep in mind their streets were not paved. Mud was a constant, challenge where they have mud. Their shoes are being caked in mud. So you want to scrape off the clay, the mud that's on your shoe. You're allowed to scrape it off on the ground, but you're not allowed to scrape it off onto the wall. Amar Rava. Rava says, my time of kosalo, why you're not allowed to do it on a wall? Mishum de mechse kibone. It must be because you're saying that putting mud on a wall is like a form of building, right? How would you build? You put a stone, and then you put some mud on it, clay on it. So the reason that Abaya must be saying that you can't do so, or Rabbi Yehuda must be saying you can't do so, is because the fact that it appears like you're building. Ask Rava though, habignin chaklahu. This is the building of a peasant. In other words, this is like no normal person goes ahead and puts a stone and then puts like some clay on the outside. That is like very, very, that's like it's not the typical way people are going to be building, that they're just going to be scraping clay on it. And therefore he says there's no way where Chazal came along and created such an isser. It must be that we have that this halacha is incorrect. Rather, Rava says, Rava, mekancho bekosel ve'e mekancho bekarka. He says the opposite. You are allowed to scrape off your feet, your shoe, on a wall, because no one's going to associate this with binyan, with building, because it's such a crude way of building, but you're not allowed to do it on the ground. Why? Dilma asil ashviye gumos. The reason you can't do it on the ground is because when you start scraping your foot on the ground, you're going to have like an area which is not flat, and you're going to cause it to come flat. You're going to fill up holes, and what happens is you fill up holes in the ground. What's the halacha? That is a form of binyan. Binyan, if there's holes in the ground, right, that's why you can't sweep on Shabbos in a dirt ground, and similarly you can't scrape your shoes off on the ground because you're going to make it flat and fill up the holes, and that is a form of binyan, of building. Itmar, mar bereid Ravina Amar echad zev aser. Both scraping on the wall and scraping on the ground are prohibited. Or Papa Amar echad zev mutter. He holds that they're both permitted. Lamar bereid Ravina b'may mekanchele. According to mar bereid Ravina says it's aser. In both cases, there has to be some way you can scrape off the clay, because at the end of the day, everyone's caked in clay. Of course, there has to be some allowance. He says, you can't do it on a wall because that's a form of building. You can't do it on the floor because you're also going to fill in the holes, and that's a form of building. If you have like a standalone beam or a standalone rock, that's you'd be allowed to scrape off the mud. Yes?
Why isn't this just like going past a light that you don't want to go on Shabbos? One of these sensors. Why isn't it like that?
So in terms of which case?
The issue of binyan, when you're sweeping your dirt floor, your intent isn't to fill up any holes.
Right. So over here, so you're asking this, it should be a davar shen miskaven. So two things. One, we have a davar shen miskaven where a few things. Davar shen miskaven, we said, is going to be aser if it's a psik resha, if it's definite, right? And we said it's allowed if it's low going by a light. The reason that I'm allowed to go a light outside of your house is because, to me, I couldn't care less about it. I don't care about your lights. But over here, if it's in my house, right? First of all, I do care about those holes, right? Meaning I do want those.
But maybe, what if I don't?
But the point is, the assumption is, you can't make that, meaning that's you being. You can't be the outlier. In other words, if most normal people want their ground to be smooth and flat, then the fact that
my intent is just get the dirt off.
That's true, but there is a if there is something where it's going to happen and it's something which is beneficial that we could assume I want, then it's going to be problematic. The postscript also points out over here specifically. Typically, a person's going to look for the place where there's a groove in the ground to do this. Meaning, to your point, they say this is more problematic in a situation where it's anywhere. Okay, maybe there's a hole, maybe there's not a hole. I want the hole, don't want the hole. Over here, the Rav is concerned. I'm specifically going to look for a place where there's a bit of a groove, right? And therefore, it's more problematic. I do want it. I'm doing it there. And therefore, it's going to be problematic. Okay. Amar Rava. Lo leisevin shapume dil lechye. A person is not allowed to sit at the edge of a lechi. Again, unrelated ruling. What's that lechi? Okay, so let's review, because we're going to get ready for, in 30 days or so, we're going to start Erevin, Mirz Hashem, and what the idea is, there is a mavoi. A mavoi is an alleyway, and the only way to, so even an alleyway which is surrounded on three sides, you still can't you can't carry in the alleyway, because it's too close to Rishus Rabbim. Chazal or sages were afraid you're going to carry from within the mavoi into the public domain, because you wouldn't see them as separate. So Chazal came along and said they created a mechanism. It's called a lechi or a kora. Some beam, either a beam on top of the area or a beam on the side, a stick on the side, and in doing so it delineates, saying this is a private area, that is a public area, and that allows you to carry within the mavoi. However, Rava says, don't sit at the edge of the lechi. Granted, you're allowed to carry in the entire mavoi, but if it has a mavoi, the stick on the side, don't sit right at the edge. Why? Dilma you might have an object, you might be like sitting with an object, you might be holding your book, whatever it is, holding something, it's going to roll out. And since you're right by this pole, which is like behind you, right, this lechi, which is behind you, you may not pay attention to the fact that this is mavoi, this is Rishus Rabbim. You might go ahead into Rishus Rabbim, bring it back in, and therefore it's a problem. Don't, just a general rule in halacha, a general rule in life. Like, don't play around the edges. Don't play with fire. Like, if there's, be in a separate place. Be in a, don't flirt with the edge where you're going to get into problems. Go and stay where, go stay in the safer place. Don't stay right on the edge. Okay, Vamarava, another halacha. Lo lahadik inish udra befuma de shisha. Person's not allowed to pack wet flocking. Wet, like pieces of wool into the mouth of a jug. Okay, so basically you have jugs back then, and the jugs needed to be stuffed when they weren't being used, or else the juice is going to come out. If it's wet, you can't stuff a wet thing into a small place. Very important halacha regarding schita. Okay, why? Dilma asli de schita. You're going to come to schita, squeezing liquid out of the cloth. It is aser midaraisa to squeeze liquid out of a cloth. Okay, there's many halachos that are relevant to this. Basically, anytime you have a, basically you certainly can't take a cloth that has liquid on it and squeeze it. That's going to be also. That's the same reason you can't use a sponge on Shabbos, right? Using a sponge on Shabbos is basically you push the sponge and liquid comes out, right? So that cannot be used. Similarly, you can't squeeze anything where you want the liquid. A very interesting shaila comes up around baby wipes. If you're allowed to use a baby wipe or not on Shabbos, because basically the whole idea of the baby wipe is you push it, and the idea is the liquid comes out, and you want the liquid to come out. Is that an issue of schita? Some say absolutely, it's forbidden, it's usher, maybe even it's usher to use. There are others who argue that for a whole host of reasons, but one of them being that the way a baby wipe is made, or many baby wipes are made, is that that the liquid is actually not trapped in if you go to open a box of baby wipes and you rub your hand over there, your hands are going to get wet. Why? Because the liquid actually sits on it's not actually absorbed into the liquid, into the solid. It's actually on the edge of it, and therefore you're actually not squeezing it out of the baby wipe. It's actually on the outside of it, and therefore is allowed. Many poskim therefore allow using baby wipes. If you use baby wipes, there's certainly what to rely upon. But there are those, again, for this issue of schita, who do not allow. There are many pertinent halachas to schita. We're not going to be able to get into all of them today. Okay, Amrav Kahana, another halacha. Again, not sort of relevant to the one before. Tit shal gabe bigdol. Let's say a person has clay on their garment. You are allowed to rub the garment from the inside. What that means is if I have like a piece of dirt over here, what I'm allowed to do is like put both my hands, I'm not doing right now, but both my hands, well, I could do like this, basically take my fingers and basically go like this and rub the item from the inside of my clothing. Okay, pretty abnormal, strange way to do it, not very effective. I cannot go ahead, I can't rub it from the outside. If I'm rubbing the thing from the outside, people know this, right? There is an issur of laundering on Shabbos. Laundering is not only putting something in the laundry and with detergent, but basically anytime if I have a stain and I go like this on Shabbos to get rid of it, I was just over at least a derabanan, but certainly a form of laundering on Shabbos, which is usher, right? It's completely usher to go ahead and rub off a thing. I'm allowed to rub something softly off of my clothing, rub it softly, assuming that the stain is going to remain, meaning I'm only taking off part of the stain. If I know I'm going to remove the entirety of the stain, then I'm not allowed to do so. But if I'm going to rub it softly and most of the stain is going, and then some of the stain is going to remain, then it is permitted. But otherwise, if I'm rubbing something in a regular fashion and removing the stain, that is usher on Shabbos. Yes.
When I was picturing Mishaf Shef, I was always picturing rubbing the two pieces together, but that's very effective to take out something, as opposed to, so then the shinoi would be, you're doing it like crazy, like this, rather than holding from the top, and Mishaf Shef like this.
They seem like the same. I'm not sure if I'm following the difference between them.
There is no difference, except that one time I'm holding it from the outside, the other time I'm holding it from the inside.
From the inside, right. So going like this, right.
Yeah.
Right, this is usher, right.
Right, but I was seeing you rubbing your hand.
Yes. So in addition, sorry, correct. Meaning to do like this is abnormal and completely usher. To do like this is certainly usher, but yes, to do like this as well, to do like this like in a regular, more regular fashion, that would also be usher as well. Meaning the only thing that's allowed is when my hand is like under my shirt, then it's going to be allowed. Okay, fine. So okay, Mason, the Gemara asked the question: Tit shal gabe min alo megara begav sakin. If you have clay on your shoe, you're allowed to scrape it off with the back of a knife. Shal bigdo megara b'tziporin. And if there is clay on one's clothing, you're allowed to scratch it off with a fingernail. Uvad shlei chaskes, as long as you don't rub the garment. Okay, so what's the question? My lav shlei chaskes klal. The implication of this brisa is that you're not allowed to rub the garment at all, right? Of which, and Rav Kahana just said you're allowed to rub the garment in the abnormal fashion from within the clothing. And it says lo shlei chaskes mevachutz el mivnim. You are allowed to. You're not allowed to rub it from the outside, but you are allowed to rub it from the inside, right? So rubbing it from the inside is allowed. Rubbing it from the outside is not allowed in any fashion. Rubbing it from the outside is not allowed, and that is the halacha. I think I've shared the story before, but apparently they say Soloveitchik was once walking to a shir on Shabbos in Boston, and like his hat flew off and it got like all muddy, and he was walking to one of his talmidim and put his hat back on. He starts walking, and they said, it's a lack of kavod, kavod Torah for the fact that you're walking with the dirty hats. He says it's kavod Shabbos that I'm walking with the dirty hats, right? I'm showing people my respect and honor for Shabbos, and that's why and therefore sometimes it means a person's going to have a stain on their shirt. Obviously, ideally, if you're able to change your shirt, you change your shirt. But if not, a person has a stain, and sometimes it's embarrassing, but very few sacrifices we make for Shabbos, that would be one of them. Have a great day.